The shout, the marketplace was alive with noise, colors and smells. Alien voices rose and fell in sharp tones, haggling, shouting, bargaining for goods. Bright stalls were filled with glowing crystals, strange fruits, weapons from across the stars, and in the middle of this chaos stood a raised platform, a stage made of black alloy. On it were slaves displayed like animals, each one chained and silent. Among them stood a young alien girl, her wrists bound, her eyes burning with anger. Her skin carried a faint shimmer of silver under the light. Her hair tangled and long, her clothes torn and thin. She looked small compared to the larger creatures around her. But there was fire inside her gaze. The alien traders pulled her forward and shouted her price, laughing, calling her weak, broken, useless. They pointed to her like she was no more than an object. One alien sneered and said, "Pet slave, cheap." "Good only for decoration," the crowd laughed, their voices echoing. The girl clenched her fists, her breath shaking, and then in front of everyone, she shouted with all the force in her chest, "I'm not your pet slave." The market fell silent for a moment. The laughter stopped. Every eye turned to her, some wide in shock, some narrowed with anger. Slaves were not supposed to speak, and they were never supposed to shout. Her voice was defiance, it was rebellion, and it cut through the noise of the entire plaza. The traders yanked her chain hard. Pulling her down to her knees, the crowd began to murmur, calling her foolish, broken, too loud. But the girl kept her head up, her voice shaking but unbroken. "I am not a pet, I am not a thing, I am alive," she cried. Her words rang out like a spark in the darkness. Most of the aliens turned away with disgust. To them she was worthless now, a slave who dared to shout back. But one figure did not look away at the edge of the crowd. Leaning against a metal post stood a human. He wore a dark jacket patched with old armor plates, a weapon slung across his back. His eyes, sharp and steady, were fixed on her. He did not laugh like the others. He did not look at her like she was an animal. He simply watched, silent and unmoving. The girl noticed him, and for a second she froze. There was something in his gaze, something she could not name. It was not pity, not mockery, but something heavier, stronger, almost like recognition. The trader saw the human looking and smirked. "Ah, you there," he called. "Human. You want this one? She shouts like a wild beast, but maybe you like that, eh?" The crowd chuckled again, the moment of silence broken. The human did not answer. He stepped forward slowly, his boots striking the stone ground with steady sound. The crowd parted a little as he moved closer to the platform. His face remained calm, his eyes never leaving the girl. The alien trader lifted the girl's chin roughly and laughed. "She is worthless, broken spirit. No one wants a slave who refuses to obey." He pulled the chain so hard that she gasped, falling against the stage rail. The human finally spoke, his voice low but clear. "Let her go." The crowd reacted instantly, gasps and whispers rising. A human telling an alien trader what to do was not normal. The trader barked a laugh. "Let her go? Why? Do you see value in this trash? Do you want her as your pet?" The girl's chest tightened, fury rising. She shouted again, though her voice cracked. "I told you I am not a pet slave." The trader raised his hand to strike her. But it never landed. The human had moved, faster than the eye could follow. His hand caught the alien's wrist in midair, his grip unshakable. The crowd gasped louder now, eyes widening. The alien hissed in rage, trying to pull back, but the human did not let go. For a moment, silence returned, heavy and tense. The girl stared, shocked that someone had stopped the blow meant for her. The trader spat, "Do you want her? Then pay or walk away." The human's eyes narrowed, and he said only one thing. "She is not for sale." The crowd broke into chaos. Some laughed, some shouted, some whispered in fear. Who was this human who dared to speak against the trader? The girl's heart pounded in her chest, her breath short for the first time since her capture. Someone had not looked at her as property. Someone had stood between her and pain. The human slowly released the alien's wrist, his hand falling to his side. He looked once more at the girl, his face calm but his eyes sharp. She did not understand him, did not know his name, but she felt something strange, a small spark of hope in the ashes of despair. The marketplace roared again, voices colliding, arguments rising, but inside her mind, one thought repeated. He didn't laugh, he didn't walk away, and as the human stood tall in front of her, she wondered, who is he and why does he care? The human's offer. The alien marketplace was still loud with voices, but every word now carried tension. Whispers rushed through the crowd. The human spoke against the traitor. He will regret this. No one challenges the market. Eyes followed him as he stood calmly, one hand resting near the weapon on his back. The alien girl stood frozen, her chain still locked to the platform rail, her chest rising and falling fast. She had never seen anyone stop a traitor like that, not for her, not for any slave. The traitor's mouth twisted into a grin, his sharp teeth flashing. "So the human wants to play hero," he sneered. "Fine. Let's make a game of it." He pulled the girl's chain harshly, dragging her forward so that she stumbled. Nearly falling, the crowd laughed again, some throwing small objects at her, mocking her weakness, but she pushed herself back up, trembling, refusing to bow her head. The human's eyes narrowed, his expression unreadable. "Name your price," he said, voice steady. The traitor's grin widened, sensing opportunity. "Price? For a broken thing like this, 1 bottle of liquor would be enough, but for you, let's raise it higher." He licked his lips, calculating, enjoying the spectacle. 2 plasma cells or 3, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Or maybe, your weapon." The crowd cheered at the thought, their voices rising in cruel excitement. The human did not flinch, he simply stepped closer, his boots echoing against the platform. He looked at the girl again, and in that moment, she glared back at him, her voice low. "Don't," she said. "I am not worth it." Her words were full of anger, but under it was fear. Fear that he might actually trade something precious for her. The human tilted his head slightly, studying her face. "You decide what you're worth," he replied softly. But firmly her breath caught, and she froze. No one had ever said those words to her before. The traitor rolled his eyes and waved his hand. "Enough of this drama, pay or walk away." Human, but instead of reaching for anything, the human said something that made the crowd gasp. "She is not for sale." The words struck harder than any weapon. The girl's chain rattled as the traitor shook with rage. "You dare insult the market? You dare insult me?" The alien shouted, his voice echoing. The crowd's energy shifted, some backing away, sensing danger, others leaning closer, eager for a fight. The human stood still, his face calm, his eyes never leaving the traitor's. "I do not buy lives," he said. "I free them." The girl's heart pounded so loud she could hear nothing else. Her throat tightened, her hands shook. No one had ever spoken like this, not in this cursed place. Her mind screamed that it was impossible, that he was lying, that humans were no different from the others. But deep inside, a fragile spark of hope began to burn. The traitor laughed, but it was a laugh full of anger, not amusement. "You want to take her? Then prove her worth, prove yours." He shoved the girl forward, making her fall again, her knees hitting the metal floor. The chain clattered as it stretched. Holding her down, the human crouched slightly, his hand brushing against the lock that bound her. He studied it for a second, then looked back at the traitor. "This lock will break," he said quietly, "and when it does, she will never wear chains again." The alien girl's breath caught, her eyes wide. Was this real, or was this another cruel trick? The crowd buzzed with voices, some shouting for the human to be punished, others urging the traitor to make him fight. Tension wrapped the marketplace like a storm about to break. The traitor hissed, his eyes narrowing into slits. "Then fight," he snarled. "Fight for her if you dare." "Human." The human slowly rose, his body straight and tall. His hand brushed the handle of his weapon but did not draw it. He looked once more at the girl, and in his eyes she saw something strange. Not command, not ownership, but a silent promise. She felt her breath tremble, her body frozen between fear and disbelief. The traitor snapped his claws, and from the shadows, guards stepped forward, large and armed, their armor glinting under the market lights. The crowd roared, sensing the start of violence. But the human only rolled his shoulders, calm, almost relaxed. The girl pressed herself against the stage rail, heart racing. If he fought them, he would die, she thought. No one survived against the market guards. Yet the human did not draw his blade. Instead, he spoke again, his voice cutting through the noise. "I will not fight for her." The crowd gasped. Some laughed, thinking he had given up. But then he added, his voice hard as steel, "She will fight for herself." The girl froze. Staring at him in shock, the guards hesitated. Confused, the traitor snarled, "What trick is this?" The human's gaze never wavered. "If she chooses to be free, nothing you do can stop her," he said. His words hit her like fire in the cold, burning away her fear. Her lips parted, her chest heavy with breath. Could it be true? Could she really fight for her own freedom? The chain around her wrists felt heavier than ever. But for the first time, she imagined it breaking. For the first time, she felt her own strength returning. The human stood still, waiting, calm and unshaken. The crowd leaned forward, eyes wide, hungry for the next moment, and the girl whispered to herself, "I am not your pet slave." But this time, it was not a shout of anger, it was a promise. The silent bond. The marketplace slowly emptied after the chaos, but the tension lingered in the air. The alien trader had not gotten what he wanted, and the human had not paid a single credit, yet somehow, the girl was no longer treated like property. The guards muttered in confusion, some even stepping back as if uncertain. The human stood calm and steady, his presence alone enough to silence their mockery. The girl sat on the cold metal floor, her wrists still bound in the heavy chain. She kept staring at him, her mind full of questions. Why did he not walk away? Why did he speak like she mattered? Why was he still here? Her lips trembled, but she refused to show weakness. She had shouted before, she had resisted before, and it had only brought pain, but this was different. The human had not struck her, not ordered her, not laughed at her. Instead, he had stopped the blow meant for her, and when he looked at her, it felt as if he saw something others never cared to see. Not a slave, not a pet, but something alive, something worth standing for. The trader finally barked, his voice sharp and bitter. "Take her then, human. Take your broken prize and see how long before she bites you." He tossed the chain into the human's hand with a cruel grin. The crowd jeered, shouting that the human was a fool. But the human did something no one expected. He dropped the chain, letting it clang against the ground. Gasps rose from every corner. The girl's eyes widened, confusion rushing through her chest. The chain lay on the dirt, untouched, unwanted. He looked at her and said quietly, "You walk free." Her breath shook, her mind refusing to believe it. Slaves were never freed. Never, not in this place, not in any place. The trader roared with laughter, thinking the human was mad. "She will run, human. She will betray you. She will leave you broken." The human did not reply. He only turned his back to the trader and began to walk. Then, without looking at her, he spoke again. "Follow if you want, or stay if you choose. It is your decision." The girl's throat tightened, her knees weak. Her mind screamed at her to run, to escape, to vanish into the shadows before anyone changed their mind. But her eyes stayed locked on the human's back as he walked calmly through the noisy crowd. No one laid a hand on him. No one dared. She hesitated, her hands trembling, then slowly stood. Her body ached. Her wrists burned, but her feet moved on their own. She followed, keeping distance. Her heart racing, each step felt like a test, like she was crossing an invisible line she had never dared to cross. The marketplace behind her roared with laughter and curses, but she kept walking. By the time night fell, the noise of the market was far behind them. They walked through empty ruins on the edge of the city, broken walls glowing faintly with old energy lines. The air was cooler here, carrying the smell of dust and iron. The human finally stopped beside a shattered structure. Setting down his pack, he did not speak, not a single word. He simply began to build a small fire from scraps of dried material. The girl watched him carefully. She kept her distance, her arms crossed tight, her eyes full of suspicion. She was waiting for the trick, waiting for the moment he would show his true purpose. But the trick never came. He only worked in silence. His movements steady and calm, the fire sparked to life, casting faint orange light across the ruins. Her stomach growled and she quickly turned away. Embarrassed, he noticed, pulling something from his pack, a ration, wrapped in silver foil. He placed it on a broken stone between them, then sat back without a word. She narrowed her eyes, not trusting it. Slowly, cautiously, she reached for it, her hands trembling. The food was plain but warm, and as she took the first bite, her throat tightened again. She could not remember the last time she had eaten without fear of it being snatched away. The human leaned back, staring at the fire. His face half hidden in the glow, he still said nothing. The silence between them was heavy but not hostile. It was strange, almost peaceful. She shifted uncomfortably, unsure of what to say. Finally, she whispered, "Why?" His eyes turned to her, steady and unreadable. "Why what?" he asked quietly. Her voice cracked as she said, "Why save me? Why not laugh? Why not chain me?" For a moment he did not answer, the firelight flickering in his eyes. Then he said simply, "Because I know what chains feel like." Her breath froze in her chest. She stared at him, searching for a lie, but saw none. There was something in his voice, raw, heavy, real. She wanted to ask more, But her throat refused to form the words. Instead, she turned away. Clutching the ration close, the fire crackled softly, filling the silence that night. She lay near the edge of the ruins, pretending to sleep, but her eyes kept drifting toward him. He sat awake, guarding the fire, his weapon resting across his lap. The shadows of the ruined walls stretched long and dark, and though she told herself she hated him, that she did not trust him, her heart whispered something different. She had never felt this kind of safety before. Not from her own people, not from anyone. When sleep finally claimed her, she did not realize that her head had tilted toward him. She did not realize her body, against her will, had chosen the space closer to the fire where he sat, and though no words were spoken, a silent bond had begun to form. One that neither of them fully understood, but both could feel deep inside. The ruins were quiet under the cold night sky. Only the fire cracked softly, sending sparks into the air. The human had finally closed his eyes, resting against a broken wall, but even in sleep, his hand never left the weapon across his lap. The alien girl lay awake, staring at the stars through the holes in the ruined ceiling. Her wrists still bore the marks of chains, red and swollen every time she closed her eyes. She saw the traitor's grin, the crowd's laughter, the jeers calling her broken. She wanted to hate the human too, but her heart refused. He had freed her, fed her, and guarded her without asking anything in return, and that made her restless because kindness was a stranger to her. The silence of the ruins shattered suddenly. A faint rustle came from the shadows, followed by the metallic click of weapons. Her eyes widened, her body stiffened, figures emerged from the dark. Raiders with armor patched from scrap, their eyes glowing red from visor lenses. They moved quietly, but their intention was clear: attack. The girl sat up quickly, fear rushing through her chest. One of the raiders raised a weapon, pointing it toward the human as he slept. Her breath caught, panic choking her. She wanted to scream, but no sound came out at the last moment. The human's eyes opened, sharp and awake. In one swift motion, he rolled aside as the first shot blasted into the wall. The fire scattered, shadows twisting violently as the raiders closed in. The human drew his weapon, his movements fast, practiced, deadly. The girl backed away, her body pressed against the stone, her mind screaming. She had no weapon, no strength, only fear. But the human stood like a shield between her and the raiders. Every strike he made was precise. Every move calculated. Still, the raiders were many, and their blades and blasters pressed closer. Blood streaked across the human's arm as one weapon grazed him. The girl gasped, her heart pounding. She saw him stagger. Yet he did not fall. He kept fighting, his eyes burning with determination. He fought not for himself, she realized, but for her. And then the moment came. The choice. One raider broke past his defense, charging straight for her. Her body froze, her breath sharp. The alien lifted a blade, aiming to cut her down. Her mind screamed to run, to escape, to leave the human behind. For a heartbeat, she almost did. Her legs twitched, ready to flee into the dark. But then she saw the human again, still fighting, still bleeding. Refusing to give up, something inside her snapped. Her fear twisted into anger. Her hands scrambled along the ground until they found a broken piece of metal. Sharp at one end, her grip shook, her body trembled. But she raised it as the raider lunged. With a scream tearing from her throat, she struck. The shard sank into the raider's side, his armor cracking, his body falling heavy to the ground. She gasped for breath, her arms shaking violently. The human turned, his eyes locking on hers for a moment. There was no surprise in his gaze, only a silent acknowledgement, as if he had always known she had this strength inside her. And in that single look, something shifted between them. The fight raged on, but now she stood beside him. Every time a raider came too close, she swung the shard, desperate but determined. The human covered her when she stumbled. She covered him when his wounds slowed him. For the first time in her life, she was not just surviving, she was fighting. Not as a slave, not as a pet, but as someone who had chosen to stand. Finally, the last raider fell. Their bodies scattered among the ruins. The silence returned, heavy with smoke and blood. The human dropped to one knee, his breath heavy, blood dripping from his arm. The girl rushed forward before she even thought about it. She pressed her hands against his wound, trying to stop the flow, her voice shaking. Why protect me?" she whispered, her throat tight. His eyes, though tired, held that same steady fire. He did not answer with many words. "Only one, because," he said, his voice low. "You are not a thing." Her breath caught. her hands trembling against his wound. No one had ever said such words to her. Her chest ached, her eyes burned, and for the first time, her heart whispered that maybe she was more than what they called her. The fire crackled weakly, the ruins lay broken, and the night was heavy with silence. But she no longer felt like the same girl who had stood in chains. She had made a choice. She had stood beside the human, and as exhaustion pulled at her body, she realized the bond between them had grown. Not just from his strength, but from her decision to fight. The past revealed, the ruins were silent after the battle. Only the faint crackle of the dying fire filled the air. The girl's hands were still stained with the raider's blood, her breath uneven, her heart still racing from the fight. The human leaned against the wall, his wound wrapped in a strip of torn fabric, his face pale but his eyes steady. They had survived, but survival did not feel the same as before. For the first time she had fought beside someone, not as a slave, not as a runaway, but as something closer to equal. The night grew colder, the stars sharp above the broken city. The girl sat across from him, hugging her knees close, her eyes fixed on the flames. Silence stretched between them, heavy and full of unspoken words she wanted to ask. Wanted to know why he risked so much for her. But the questions caught in her throat. Tangled with fear and doubt, at last she whispered, her voice so soft it almost vanished in the wind. You said you know what chains feel like. The human turned his head slightly, his expression unreadable. Yes, he said simply, his tone calm but carrying a weight she could not ignore. She stared at him, her breath shaky, her chest tight. What did they do to you? She asked, her voice trembling. For a long time he did not answer. The firelight flickered across his face, showing shadows under his eyes, scars along his jaw. Finally he spoke, his words slow, as if each one carried a memory he did not want to touch. I was captured once, far from here, taken in a raid. Just like you. Her eyes widened, her body stiff, he continued, his voice quiet but sharp. They chained me, beat me, made me work until I could barely stand. They called me worthless, less than them, a creature, not a man. The girl's hands curled tight, her breath ragged. Hearing it from him was like hearing her own pain spoken aloud. Her throat tightened as she whispered, Then how? How are you still free? He looked at her, his gaze burning. I broke the chains not with strength alone, but with will, he said, and I swore never again to watch another suffer if I could stand between them and their pain. Her chest ached. Tears pressed at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had not cried since her capture, since the day her world had turned into chains and cruelty. But now, sitting by the fire with him, she felt the walls inside her beginning to break. Her lips parted, and before she could stop herself, the truth spilled out. My people, my home all gone, she whispered, her voice breaking. They came in ships, they burned the cities. They took everyone who survived. I was sold like meat, displayed like an animal. Her body shook as the memories rushed back. Her parents' faces, her brother's voice, the fire, the screams, the endless cages. I shouted, I resisted, but it only made them laugh harder. They called me broken. They called me useless. They said no one would ever want me. Her voice cracked. Her hands covered her face. I began to believe them. I began to think they were right, that I was nothing. The human leaned forward slightly, his voice firm but gentle. You are not nothing. She lowered her hands, her eyes red, staring at him, searching for a lie. But there was none, only truth, heavy and steady in his gaze. You fought tonight. You stood when you could have run, he said. That choice proves you are more than what they told you. Her breath hitched, her chest rising and falling fast. She looked down at her trembling hands, the same hands that had held the shard, that had struck a raider, that had saved him for the first time. She saw not weakness but strength, and it scared her, because strength meant responsibility, and responsibility meant choice. But in that fear, there was also something new, hope. The fire flickered low, casting long shadows across the ruins. She leaned back slowly, exhaustion pulling at her body. Without realizing it, she shifted closer to him, the warmth of his presence steady beside her. Her head grew heavy. Her eyes burned from sleepless nights and too many memories before she could stop herself. She drifted into sleep, her body leaning toward him. When her eyes fluttered half open in a dreamlike haze, she realized her head had fallen into his lap. Her heart jumped, shame and fear colliding inside her. But the human did not push her away, did not move. He simply sat still, his hand resting on his weapon, his gaze fixed on the dark beyond the fire, guarding her as she slept in that moment, though her mind fought it. Her heart whispered the truth. She was no longer alone. Her past was pain, but her present was changing, and for the first time since her capture, she dreamed not of chains but of freedom. The new enemy, the fire had burned to ash by morning. Smoke curled faintly into the pale sky as the ruins lay quiet. The human rose first, his movements steady though his wounds were still fresh. The girl stirred slowly, realizing with a sharp breath that her head had been resting in his lap. She pulled back quickly, embarrassed, her cheeks warming. But the human said nothing. He only checked his weapon and began to pack his things. She watched him for a moment, confusion heavy in her chest. Why did he not chain her? Why did he not treat her as the others did? Why did he let her walk free when he had every chance to control her? The silence between them was strange. Heavy yet comfortable, at last she muttered, Where are we going?" The human glanced at her once, then turned toward the horizon. "Away from here," he said simply. They walked through the day across broken lands. The sky was wide and gray, the wind carrying the scent of dust and smoke. The ruins of old battles stretched around them, shattered machines half buried in sand. The girl walked a few steps behind at first, still cautious, still unsure. But as the hours passed, she found herself walking closer, and when strangers on the road muttered cruel things about humans, she felt anger rise inside her. More than once she glared back at them as if daring them to say more. The bond between them grew without words. Each step, each silence, each glance carried weight. But peace never lasted long, not in this world. By nightfall, the whispers began. Rumors carried by travelers at broken camps. A warlord was coming, hunting escaped slaves and those who dared to free them. His name alone carried fear. His soldiers marched through the dust like shadows, and every whisper carried the same warning. He wants her back. The broken girl who shouted in the market. The girl froze when she heard it. Her heart hammered, her throat tightened. Her past had always chased her, but now it had a name, a face, and an army. She looked at the human, expecting him to leave her, to say she was too much trouble. But he only tightened the strap of his pack and said calmly, "Then let him come." His words shook her more than the rumor itself. There was no fear in his tone, no hesitation, only a quiet defiance. It was the same strength she had seen in the marketplace, the same unshakable fire, and part of her hated it, because it made her feel weak beside him, but another part of her clung to it, desperate for something strong enough to face the storm. The following days grew darker. Signs of the warlord's march were everywhere. Burned settlements, crushed machines, trails of smoke rising in the distance. Each time they found shelter, the girl could not sleep. She heard the warlord's voice in her mind, the traitors' laughter, the jeers of the crowd. She feared that no matter where she ran, chains would find her again. One night, as the wind howled through the ruins of an old dome, she finally spoke. "You should leave me," she whispered, her voice raw. "If the warlord wants me, then he will come for me, and you will be caught in it." The human did not move, his eyes fixed on the horizon beyond the cracked walls. "I do not leave those who choose freedom," he said quietly. Her throat tightened, tears stinging her eyes though she forced them back. "Why?" she asked. "Why risk yourself for me?" He turned his gaze to her, steady and calm. "Because no one risked themselves for me, and it nearly broke me." Her breath caught, her heart heavy with the truth in his words. She wanted to argue, to push him away, but no words came. She only lowered her head, whispering, "I am not worth this," but he answered firmly, "You decide your worth, not them." The days bled together until the smoke on the horizon grew closer. The warlord's banners rose high, black and red, marked with jagged symbols of conquest. His soldiers marched in perfect rhythm, their weapons shining under the pale sun. The air trembled with their approach, every sound like thunder rolling through the broken land. The girl stood on a ridge beside the human, her knees weak, her body trembling. She whispered, "He came," her voice hollow with dread. The human's eyes narrowed, his hand resting on his weapon. "Then we stand," he said, his voice unshaken. The warlord himself rode at the front, his armor massive, his eyes cold and cruel. He raised his hand and pointed directly at her, his voice booming across the ruins. "Return the slave, human, and I will spare your life." The girl's stomach twisted, fear choking her. The crowd of soldiers roared behind their leader. A sound like a storm breaking, but the human did not flinch. His voice cut through the chaos, clear and sharp. "She is not your slave," the warlord laughed. The sound deep and terrible. "You think one human can defy me? You think she has value?" He sneered, his voice sharp as a blade. "She is broken, worthless, no better than an animal. And I will have her back." The girl's chest clenched, her breath shaky. The old words still burned her, still threatened to break her. But before the human could reply, she stepped forward, her voice trembling but strong. "I am not your pet slave," she shouted. "Not anymore." The warlord's eyes narrowed. Rage flashing across his face, the human glanced at her, and in that look she saw trust. The soldiers shifted, weapons raised, the air heavy with the weight of the coming fight. And though fear clawed at her, the girl's heart burned with something new. Not just survival, but defiance. She was not running this time. Not hiding, not silent, she stood beside the human, her voice steady even as the world shook around her, and she whispered to herself, "This time, I choose." The final stand. The warlord's army spread across the broken land like a dark tide. Banners whipped in the wind, weapons gleamed under the pale sun, and the ground shook with every step of marching boots. The girl stood on the ridge beside the human, her hands trembling, her throat dry. Her heart screamed at her to run, but her feet stayed planted. She had shouted once in the market. She had fought once in the ruins. But this was bigger, louder, heavier than anything she had faced before. The warlord's voice boomed again, sharp and cruel. "Return the slave, human, and I will let you crawl away with your life." The soldiers roared behind him, their voices crashing like thunder. The girl's knees weakened. But then she felt it, the human's steady presence beside her. He did not move, did not waver, his gaze fixed firmly on the enemy, and when he spoke, his words cut through the chaos, calm and clear. "She is not your slave. She is not yours to command." The warlord's laughter shook the air. "You think she belongs to you," he sneered. "You think she is worth standing against me?" The girl's chest tightened, fear twisting into anger. She stepped forward, her voice shaking but sharp. "I do not belong to anyone," she shouted. "Not to him, not to you, not to anyone. I am not your pet slave." The soldiers jeered, their laughter cruel. But the human turned his eyes to her, and in them she saw trust. He was not speaking for her anymore, he was standing with her. The weight of that truth gave her strength. Her voice rose again, stronger this time. "If you want me, then you will have to kill me, because I will never kneel again." The warlord's face twisted with rage. "Then die with your human," he roared, and he raised his hand. The soldiers surged forward, their weapons raised, their voices a wave of fury. The human drew his blade, the steel gleaming as he moved to meet them. The girl's heart pounded, but she bent down, snatched up a discarded spear from the ground and raised it high. For the first time, she was not hiding behind him, she was fighting beside him. The battle crashed like a storm. The human struck with deadly precision, every swing of his blade cutting through the tide. The girl thrust and swung clumsily at first, her arms shaking, but with each strike her strength grew. They fought back to back, covering each other, their movements raw but powerful. Blood and smoke filled the air. Screams and steel clashed together, and through it all, the human never once let fear show on his face. The warlord himself stepped into the fight, towering in heavy armor, his blade massive and sharp. He swung with crushing force, each strike enough to break stone. The human met him head-on, sparks flying as their blades clashed. The ground shook with every impact. The girl staggered but refused to fall. She darted forward, her spear striking at the warlord's armor. It barely scratched him, but it drew his eyes to her, his rage burning hotter. "You dare raise a weapon against me? Broken slave," he roared. The words stabbed into her chest like knives, but this time she did not lower her head. She screamed back, "I am not broken, and I am not yours." The warlord struck at her, his blade cutting the air. The human moved faster than thought, blocking the strike with his own body. Steel tore through his shoulder. Blood spilling, he staggered but did not fall, his jaw tight with pain. The girl's heart shattered at the sight, rage and fear colliding inside her. Her scream tore through the battlefield as she drove the spear into the warlord's side with all the strength left in her body. The blade pierced through a crack in his armor. Sinking deep, the warlord howled, his massive body collapsing to one knee. The human swung his sword one last time, cutting through the warlord's helm. The ground trembled as the warlord fell, silence rushing over the battlefield. The soldiers froze, their roars dying in their throats. Their leader lay dead, his banners broken one by one. They dropped their weapons and fled, their shadows scattering into the dust. The field was quiet again, broken only by the sound of the wind. The girl dropped the spear, her hands shaking, her chest heaving. She turned to the human who sank to the ground. Blood staining his armor, she rushed to him, falling to her knees, her hands pressing desperately against his wound. "You saved me again," she whispered. Tears burning her eyes, he looked at her, his voice weak but steady. "No, you saved me." Her heart broke at his words, her tears falling freely now. She lowered her head, her forehead resting against his chest. "I thought I was nothing," she whispered, her voice shaking. "But you showed me I am more. You gave me the choice and I chose." The human's hand lifted weakly, resting on her shoulder. "And you will never kneel again," he said softly. Her tears fell harder, her body trembling. Slowly, gently, she shifted closer, her head finding its place in his lap, not as a slave, not as property, but as someone free, someone who had chosen where to belong. The battlefield was still littered with blood and broken weapons, but in her heart there was peace. She was no longer chained, no longer silenced, no longer broken. And as the sun rose over the ruins, she whispered, her voice steady, "This is not slavery, this is home."